Elara had always understood the universe as a series of elegant equations and breathtaking, if distant, phenomena. For years, her world had been defined by the sterile glow of computer screens, the hushed reverence of observatory domes, and the relentless pursuit of cosmic truths. She could recite the stellar classification of 1,000 stars, map the gravitational dance of galaxies, and trace the life cycle of a supernova with intricate precision. But lately, the vastness had begun to feel less like a calling and more like a void. The brilliance of distant suns seemed to mock the dimness she felt within. So, when the solicitor's letter arrived, bearing news of a great aunt she barely remembered, a woman named Asteria who'd lived a life as mysterious and solitary as the celestial bodies Elara studied, it felt less like a surprise and more like a preordained escape route. Asteria had bequeathed her a cabin, deep within a place called Celestine Valley, a name that alone promised something more magical than the fluorescent hum of her current existence. The drive was long, a deliberate winding away from everything familiar. Highways dissolved into state roads, then into narrow, tree-lined lanes that seemed to swallow the last vestiges of cell signal. Elara's sensible sedan, usually a blur on urban freeways, now crept along, the tires crunching on gravel, stirring up scents of pine and damp earth she hadn't realized she missed. The landscape unfolded around her, a tapestry of ancient forests climbing toward rugged peaks, their summits dusted with lingering snow even in late spring. This wasn't just a change of scenery. It was a shift in hemisphere, a recalibration of her internal compass. Celestine Valley itself appeared as if plucked from a forgotten storybook. A single main street, curving gently around a small, impossibly clear lake, boasted a cluster of buildings that looked like they'd been there for centuries, a general store with a faded awning, a post office no bigger than her living room, a cafe whose windows steamed with the promise of fresh coffee. Smoke curled lazily from a few chimneys, and the scent of wood smoke mingled with the sweet perfume of blooming wild honeysuckle. It was quiet, a quiet that hummed with life rather than absence. Her great-aunt's cabin, according to the cryptic directions, lay a few miles beyond the main village, nestled further into the woods. The road narrowed again, becoming little more than 2 tire tracks through a tunnel of towering firs. Elara's heart, which had felt like a heavy, inert mass for months, began to flutter with a strange mix of apprehension and exhilaration. Finally, the trees parted, revealing a clearing. And there it was. The cabin wasn't grand, or even particularly well-maintained, but it possessed an undeniable charm. Built of rough-hewn logs, its porch sagged slightly under the weight of time, and the windows, though clean, were framed by shutters that had long since lost their paint. A fieldstone chimney stood sentinel at one end, and a riot of wildflowers, unchecked and glorious, spilled from what might once have been a garden bed. An enormous oak, its branches like gnarled arms, sheltered the entire structure, casting dappled shadows across the mossy roof. Elara parked her car, the engine sighing into silence. The quiet here was profound, broken only by the chirping of unseen birds and the whisper of wind through the leaves. She stepped out, stretching her stiff limbs, and breathed deeply. The air was crisp, clean, and carried the scent of pine needles and something else. Something wild and free. She found the key hidden beneath a weathered ceramic gnome on the porch, exactly as the solicitor had described. It was heavy, old iron, and turned with a groan in the lock. The door swung inward, revealing a cavernous, dust-filled space. Sunlight, filtered through the oak leaves outside, painted stripes across the wooden floorboards. The air inside was cool, and smelled faintly of old wood, forgotten tea, and something indefinably Asteria. There was a stone fireplace, dark and cold, at the heart of the main room. A sturdy, if somewhat sagging, sofa sat opposite, covered in a faded quilt. Bookshelves crammed with tattered volumes lined one wall, and a small, rickety telescope stood in a corner, its brass tarnished, aimed toward a dust-laden window. Elara ran a hand over its cool metal, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Asteria, it seemed, had also been a stargazer. For the next few hours, Elara busied herself opening windows, sweeping away cobwebs, and uncovering furniture draped in white sheets. Every object she touched felt like an artifact, a whisper from a life lived differently. There were peculiar constellations carved into a wooden box, a collection of smooth, lake-worn stones on the mantelpiece, and a stack of notebooks filled with flowing script and intricate drawings of flora she didn't recognize. Asteria, it seemed, had been more than just a distant relative. She had been a kindred spirit, though one far more connected to the earth than Elara had ever allowed herself to be. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of lavender and apricot, Elara found herself on the porch, a mug of instant coffee warming her hands. She had unpacked only the essentials: a sleeping bag on the single, narrow bed in the small bedroom, a change of clothes, and her own, far more advanced, portable telescope. The cabin was a project, a daunting one, but it was worse. A fresh slate. Then, the stars appeared. First, a tentative pinprick, then another, and another, until the entire sky blazed with an intensity Elara had only ever witnessed from professional observatories, far from the light pollution of cities. Here, in Celestine Valley, the heavens felt close enough to touch. The Milky Way unfurled above her like a shimmering river of diamonds, its gaseous clouds and distant nebulae visible to the naked eye. She gasped, a sound lost in the vast silence. This was why Asteria had chosen this place. This was why Elara had come. She spent hours on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, simply watching. The cold seeped into her bones, but she didn't care. For the first time in what felt like years, the universe didn't feel like a problem to be solved, a data set to be analyzed. It was simply beautiful. And in that beauty, a tiny spark of something she hadn't known she'd lost began to flicker to life within her. Yet, even amidst such breathtaking wonder, a subtle ache of loneliness persisted. The stars were magnificent, but they were silent. Renuite. The next morning, Elara woke stiff, but refreshed. The first order of business was to explore the village and gather supplies. The cabin, she'd quickly discovered, lacked modern plumbing and relied on a well, which, thankfully, was in working order. But she needed food, candles, and most importantly, information on who might be able to help her make the cabin habitable. It was clear this wasn't a DIY project for someone whose practical skills extended mostly to calibrating sensitive scientific instruments. She drove back down the winding lane, the morning sun filtering through the trees, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The village of Celestine Valley was even more charming in the daylight. A few cars were parked outside the general store, and the scent of brewing coffee wafted from the cafe, beckoning. The general store was a treasure trove of local goods and essential provisions. Shelves were stocked with everything from canned goods to fishing lures, gardening tools to hand-knitted socks. A bell jingled cheerfully as Elara stepped inside. Behind the counter, a woman with kind eyes and a cascade of silver braids smiled warmly. "Well, hello there, darlin'. New face in Celestine. You must be Elara, Asteria's niece." Elara blinked, surprised. "Yes, I am. How did you know?" The woman chuckled. "Word travels faster than wildfire in these parts, especially when a new owner arrives at the old Vance cabin. I'm Martha, by the way. My family's run this store for 3 generations." She extended a flour-dusted hand. "It's lovely to meet you, Martha." Elara shook her hand, feeling an immediate warmth. "The cabin. It's quite a project." "Oh, Asteria's place always had character," Martha said, a nostalgic glint in her eye. "But yes, it needs a bit of love. Anything you need, you just ask. We've got a little bit of everything. Or if we don't, we know someone who does." "Actually," Elara began, "I was hoping you could point me towards someone who handles renovations. The cabin needs everything, really. Plumbing, electrical, some structural work, I think." Martha nodded knowingly. "Only one man for a job like that around here, Finn O'Connell. He's got the golden touch with wood, and he knows these old places like the back of his hand. Built half the furniture in this store, and fixed up most of the houses." "Finn O'Connell," Elara repeated, trying to commit the name to memory. "Does he have a workshop, or a number?" "His workshop's just down past the old mill, on the left," Martha explained, giving her precise directions. "You'll see his sign, O'Connell Woodworks. He's usually there if he's not out on a job. Can be a bit quiet, Finn. But don't let that fool you. Heart of gold, that one." Armed with a basket full of groceries and Martha's advice, Elara decided to brave Finn O'Connell's workshop immediately. The sooner she got the cabin sorted, the sooner she could truly settle in. She found the workshop easily. It was a sturdy, squat building nestled amongst more trees, a plume of sawdust visible from its open double doors. The air here was rich with the scent of freshly cut timber, a smell that was surprisingly comforting. As she approached, she heard the rhythmic thud of a hammer and the whine of a saw. Peeking inside, Elara saw a workspace that was a symphony of organized chaos. Tools hung meticulously on pegboards, wood shavings blanketed the floor in drifts, and various pieces of furniture, tables, chairs, a half-finished cabinet, stood in different stages of creation. And then she saw him. He was bent over a workbench, his back to her, deeply engrossed in sanding a piece of wood. Broad shoulders strained against the fabric of his worn plaid shirt. Dark hair, slightly too long, fell across his forehead, dusted with sawdust. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his hands strong and skilled. Elara cleared her throat, feeling a blush creep up her neck. She suddenly felt acutely aware of her own polished, professional appearance, so out of place in this rugged environment. He straightened slowly, turning. Finn O'Connell was taller than she'd anticipated, and his presence filled the workshop. His eyes, the color of deep moss, held a surprising intensity, framed by a scattering of laugh lines at the corners. His face was rugged, sun-kissed, with a slight stubble that softened the strong line of his jaw. He wasn't conventionally handsome in the way of magazine models, but there was a raw, earthy appeal to him, a quiet strength that was immediately captivating. "Can I help you?" His voice was low, a little gravelly, and held the faintest trace of a local accent. He didn't smile, but his gaze was direct, curious. "Hello," Elara managed, feeling a sudden awkwardness. "My name is Elara Vance. Martha, at the general store, suggested I come see you. I'm Asteria Vance's great niece. I've inherited her cabin." Finn's eyes softened imperceptibly at the mention of Asteria. "Ah, Asteria, good woman." He leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. "Heard you were coming. What can I do for you, Miss Vance?" "Elara, please," she corrected. "Well, the cabin, it needs a lot of work. Everything, really. The plumbing is ancient, the wiring is probably a fire hazard, and I think there might be some issues with the roof. I was hoping you could take a look, give me an estimate, and maybe help me fix it up." He regarded her for a moment, his gaze assessing, taking in her slightly disheveled but still city-smart attire, her earnest expression. "Asteria's place," he mused. "It's a gem, but it'll be a big job. I'm pretty booked up for the next few weeks." He paused, and Elara's heart sank a little. She'd anticipated this. She was just another inconvenience for a busy local. "But for Asteria's cabin," he added, a hint of something warmer entering his tone, "I'll make an exception. She always looked out for me. How about I swing by sometime next week? Tuesday afternoon, say." A wave of relief washed over Elara. "Tuesday would be perfect. Thank you so much, Finn." She felt a genuine smile break through her earlier nervousness. "I really appreciate it." He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "No problem. Just give me your address up there." She scribbled it down on a scrap of paper he offered, their fingers brushing for a fleeting moment. A surprising jolt, like static electricity, passed between them. Elara quickly pulled her hand back, feeling her cheeks flush again. Finn, however, seemed unmoved, his expression as stoic as ever, though she thought she detected a faint flicker in his moss-green eyes. "See you Tuesday, then," he said, picking up his sanding block. The dismissal was gentle but clear. He had work to do. "Right," Elara said, feeling a little flustered. "Goodbye, Finn." She retreated from the workshop, the scent of sawdust clinging to her clothes, her mind replaying the brief encounter. Finn O'Connell. He was exactly as Martha had described, quiet, but with an underlying kindness. And something else. Something that had stirred a little flutter in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Oi! The next few days were a blur of minor victories and exasperating failures. Elara, determined not to sit idle while waiting for Finn, decided to tackle some of the cosmetic aspects of the cabin. She scrubbed years of grime from the kitchen sink, swept out cobwebs that seemed to regenerate overnight, and wrestled with a leaky faucet in the tiny bathroom, only to make it leak more profusely. Her hands, usually accustomed to the delicate precision of scientific instruments, now sported blisters and dirt beneath her fingernails. She discovered the joys of cooking on a temperamental wood-burning stove, the simple satisfaction of a meal made from scratch. She started taking long walks in the surrounding forest, marveling at the towering trees and the intricate ecosystems beneath her feet. She even managed to coax a few of the overgrown wildflowers into some semblance of order near the porch, though her gardening skills were rudimentary at best. Celestine Valley slowly began to unfurl its quiet rhythms to her. Mornings were for the bustling activity at Martha's general store and the comforting clatter from the cafe. Afternoons brought the sleepy hum of insects and the distant sound of a saw from Finn's workshop. Evenings were for the spectacular star show, which she now observed from her porch, sometimes with a hot cup of herbal tea, sometimes with a glass of surprisingly good local wine she'd found in the general store. She hadn't realized how starved she was for this kind of quiet, this kind of connection to the natural world. Her life in academia had been intellectually stimulating, but emotionally isolating. Here, among the ancient trees and the vast unpolluted sky, she felt a subtle shift within her, a shedding of the anxieties that had plagued her. Tuesday arrived, bright and clear. Elara spent the morning cleaning the cabin, feeling a nervous energy that she attributed to the anticipation of getting the renovation process started. She wanted the cabin to feel welcoming, despite its current state of disrepair. Precisely at 2 o'clock, a sturdy, dark blue pickup truck rumbled up the lane and parked beside her sedan. Finn O'Connell emerged, carrying a worn leather tool belt slung low on his hips and a clipboard in one hand. He wore the same plaid shirt, though a different color, and his dark hair was still dusted with sawdust, but his eyes were clear and observant. "Afternoon, Elara," he greeted, his voice as steady as the mountain air. "Finn, come in," she said, opening the door wider. "It's still a work in progress, as you can see." He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the main room, taking in her meager attempts at tidying, the cleared spaces, the few personal touches she'd added. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips as he noticed the neatly stacked pile of Asteria's old star charts and Elara's modern telescope standing sentinel near the window. Asteria always kept it cozy, even when things were falling apart around her, he commented, his voice tinged with affection. He walked slowly through the cabin, his movements deliberate, his eyes missing nothing. He opened cupboards, peered under the sink, knelt to examine the floorboards, and ran a hand along the stone of the fireplace. Elara followed, feeling a strange mix of deference and curiosity. He was in his element here, a master craftsman assessing his canvas. "The plumbing's copper, original," he stated, peering under the kitchen sink. "Still got some life, but you'll want to upgrade. Electrical's knob and tube, a fire waiting to happen. That'll all need to be pulled out and rewired." He moved to the small bathroom, shaking his head slightly at the leaky faucet. "And the roof. She's seen better days. Probably a few soft spots in the rafters, too. That old oak drops a lot of leaves and branches." Elara felt a familiar dread begin to creep in. It sounded like an endless list of expensive, complex problems. "So, it's bad then?" Finn finally turned to her, his expression unreadable. "It's an old house, Elara. They all have their quirks, but Asteria built it solid. The bones are good. It just needs someone to bring it back to life." He met her gaze, and in his moss-green eyes, she saw not pity, but a quiet confidence, a belief in the potential of the structure, and perhaps in her. He stepped back onto the porch, looking out at the overgrown wildflowers. "You've got a good view here. Best stargazing in the valley," Asteria used to say. Elara's heart warmed at the mention of her great-aunt. She wasn't wrong. "I spent most of my first night out here." She gestured to the telescope. "It's why I do what I do." Finn nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You're an astronomer then?" "Astrophysicist, actually," she clarified, a hint of her old professional pride returning. "I study the universe, or I did. I'm on a sabbatical." She didn't elaborate on the burnout, the disillusionment. He simply listened, his gaze fixed on the distant peaks. "Must be something, seeing all that." "It is," she agreed softly. "It's humbling and inspiring. Sometimes, though, it can also feel very far away." "The stars are always there, Elara," Finn said, turning to her, his voice gentle. "Whether you're looking at them or not, sometimes you just need to find your footing on the ground first." His words resonated deeply. She hadn't expected such insight from him, a man of wood and tools. She looked up at him, truly seeing him now, not just as a contractor, but as a person, grounded and observant. He consulted his clipboard, scribbling notes. All right, I'll draw up a detailed estimate for you. It'll take some time, not just for me to do the work, but to source materials, get permits for the electrical and plumbing. We're talking months, Elara, not weeks. Months. The word hung in the air, both daunting and strangely comforting. Months in Celestine Valley. Months with Finn O'Connell working on her cabin, in her space. I understand, she said, a new resolve hardening her voice. I'm not in a hurry. I want it done right. He gave her a small, approving nod. Good. I'll get this to you by the end of the week. In the meantime, I can patch that leak in the bathroom so it doesn't get worse. And I'll leave you some firewood for that stove. He gestured to a pile of logs near the back door. It'll take the chill off these nights. Thank you, Finn, she said, feeling a rush of gratitude. That would be wonderful. He spent another hour, quietly efficient, patching the leak with a temporary fix, explaining to her how the well pump worked, and showing her the best way to light the wood stove. He moved around the cabin with a familiarity that suggested he'd spent time here before, perhaps with Asteria. He was patient with her questions, his explanations clear and concise. As he gathered his tools, ready to leave, he paused at the doorway, looking back at her. It'll be a beautiful home again, Elara. Asteria would be pleased. And then he was gone, the rumble of his truck fading into the quiet of the forest. Elara stood in the doorway for a long moment, the scent of fresh wood smoke now mingling with the lingering aroma of sawdust from his visit. She looked around the old cabin, seeing it through his eyes, seeing its potential, its sturdy bones, its promise. And then she looked up at the boundless expanse of the afternoon sky, knowing that soon the stars would appear. They were always there, just as Finn had said, constant and reassuring. And now, perhaps, she was beginning to find her footing on the ground, too, here in Celestine Valley, beneath the watchful gaze of the cosmos, and with the unexpected anticipation of Finn O'Connell's return. The afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the sky in strokes of lavender and gold, casting long, dancing shadows across the cabin's weathered porch. Elara, still on the steps, felt the air grow cooler, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The silence of the valley, once alien, now hummed with a comforting presence, a quiet symphony of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. She found herself smiling, a soft, unbidden curve of her lips. It was a genuine smile, one that hadn't graced her face with such ease in years. Just as the last sliver of sun vanished behind the western peaks, a familiar rumble echoed down the winding dirt track. Elara's heart gave a little flutter, a sensation she promptly dismissed as mere curiosity. But as Finn's truck, laden with an array of supplies, rounded the bend, she knew it was more than that. A warmth spread through her chest, a quiet anticipation that settled deep in her bones. Finn parked beside the cabin, his movements unhurried as he cut the engine. He pushed open his door, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder, a cardboard box tucked under one arm. His gaze met hers, and a slow, easy smile spread across his face, mirroring her own. Looks like I made it just in time for the show, he said, gesturing to the deepening twilight sky. Just about, Elara replied, rising from the steps, a newfound energy coursing through her. She met him by the truck, reaching for a bag of groceries. Their fingers brushed, a brief, electric spark that made her pull back slightly, feigning focus on the bag. I brought some things for dinner, he explained, his voice low and warm, as they began to unload. And some tools. Thought we could make a dent in that porch tomorrow. That would be wonderful, Elara managed, her voice a little breathy. The idea of them working together, side by side, filled her with a surprising sense of contentment. Inside the cabin, a single kerosene lamp cast a soft golden glow, making the rustic interior feel unexpectedly cozy. Finn, with a quiet efficiency, started a fire in the old wood stove, and soon the crackle and warmth filled the small space. He set about preparing a simple meal, pasta with a hearty tomato sauce, studded with vegetables he'd picked up from a local farm stand. Elara found herself naturally falling into step, chopping garlic, grating cheese, her hands moving with an ease she hadn't realized she possessed. The aroma of simmering herbs and garlic soon mingled with the scent of wood smoke, creating an inviting atmosphere. They ate at the small, sturdy table Elara had discovered tucked away in the corner, its surface smoothed by generations of use. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences. Finn spoke of the valley, its seasons, the constellations that would soon dominate the night sky. Elara found herself sharing anecdotes about her grandmother, the way she used to tell stories of Celestine Valley, her eyes alight with a distant fondness. She loved this place, didn't she? Finn observed, his gaze gentle. Elara nodded, pushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. More than anywhere, I think she always hoped I'd come back here. Find whatever she found. And are you finding it? He asked, his eyes holding hers, a quiet question in their depths. Elara hesitated, then a small smile touched her lips. Perhaps. I'm certainly finding something I didn't expect. She didn't elaborate, and he didn't press. Instead, he simply offered her more pasta, his gesture warm and understanding. After dinner, as the last of the dishes were washed and put away, Finn led her back outside. The sky had transformed into a velvet canvas, dusted with an unimaginable array of stars. Without the city lights, the Milky Way was a shimmering river, stretching across the heavens. Finn pointed out constellations, his voice a quiet murmur in the darkness. He spoke of ancient myths and scientific wonders, of the vastness of space and the smallness of human lives, yet his words never felt diminishing. Instead, they imbued Elara with a profound sense of connection, of being part of something immense and beautiful. It's truly incredible, Elara whispered, tilting her head back, her breath misting in the cool night air. I've never seen anything like it. It's always there, Finn said, his voice close beside her, waiting for us to look up. He paused, then added, Your grandmother used to say the stars were like old friends. Always there, always watching over us. Elara felt a pang of emotion. It was a comfort to hear someone else speak of her grandmother with such warmth. She did, didn't she? She'd tell me stories about them when I was little. I'd forgotten. They stood there for a long time, side by side, sharing the silence and the majesty of the night sky. There was a quiet intimacy in their shared observation, a sense of two souls finding a peaceful rhythm together. When Finn finally turned, a soft sigh escaping his lips, Elara felt a reluctance to break the spell. Well, he said, his voice a little huskier than before, I should probably head back to my own cabin. Got an early start tomorrow. Elara felt a flicker of disappointment, but she quickly masked it. Of course. Thank you, Finn, for everything. The dinner, the stars. He smiled, that slow, easy smile that reached his eyes. My pleasure, Elara. Get some rest. He hesitated for a moment, as if contemplating something more, then simply nodded and walked towards his truck. Elara watched him go, the twin beams of his headlights disappearing down the track, leaving her once again in the quiet darkness, but this time, it felt different. Not empty, but full of the lingering warmth of his presence, the echo of his words, and the promise of a new day. She stepped back inside, the cabin no longer feeling quite so solitary. She was beginning to see the potential not just in its sturdy bones, but in the life that could be built within its walls, a life that, surprisingly, might include Finn Owen Connell. Why? The next morning, Elara awoke to the gentle tap of a hammer. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, then remembered. Finn. She threw on a pair of jeans and a flannel shirt, feeling a surge of energy she hadn't experienced in years. When she stepped outside, Finn was already at work on the porch, replacing a rotted floorboard with practiced ease. The crisp morning air carried the scent of fresh-cut wood, a clean, invigorating aroma. Morning, she called out, feeling a blush creep up her neck as he straightened, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He was wearing a faded denim shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, and a smattering of sawdust clung to his dark hair. Morning, Elara. Slept well? Like a log, she admitted, stretching. What can I do? He handed her a sanding block. You can get started on these railings. They've seen better days. And so began their unexpected partnership. Days bled into weeks, each one a rhythm of shared labor and quiet discovery. Elara, initially hesitant, soon found herself embracing the physical work with an almost fierce determination. She scraped and painted, hammered and sawed, her hands growing calloused, her muscles aching in a satisfying way. Finn was an excellent teacher, patient and encouraging, explaining the nuances of carpentry and the wisdom of working with the land. They talked as they worked, their conversations weaving between practical tasks and deeper revelations. Elara found herself opening up to Finn in a way she never had with anyone. She spoke of the relentless pace of her old life, the suffocating pressure of deadlines, the hollowness of chasing success that ultimately felt meaningless. She described the moment of burnout, the feeling of being utterly depleted, her creative spirit extinguished. Finn listened intently, his gaze steady and empathetic. "Sounds like you needed a reset," he mused one afternoon as they sat on the newly repaired porch, sipping steaming mugs of coffee. "A chance to remember what truly nourishes you." "I think so," Elara agreed, looking out at the sun-dappled valley. "I just never expected to find it here, or that it would feel like this." She gestured vaguely at the cabin, at the valley, at their shared space. Finn offered a small, knowing smile. "Celestine Valley has a way of revealing things you didn't know you were looking for." He then shared bits of his own story. He'd grown up in a small town, a place much like this, but had left for a time, drawn by the allure of a faster life, a more conventional career. He'd worked in tech, in a bustling city, but had found it unfulfilling, a constant striving that lacked genuine connection. "I came back after a rough patch," he admitted, his gaze drifting to the distant mountains. "Lost someone important to me. The city felt too loud, too impersonal. I needed the quiet, the vastness." He didn't elaborate on the rough patch, and Elara, respecting his privacy, didn't pry. But she understood. She saw the quiet strength in him, the peace he had found, hard-won in this solitude. Their shared moments grew in number and intimacy. One afternoon, while they were clearing an overgrown path leading down to the creek, Elara stumbled, and Finn's hand shot out, steadying her. His touch lingered for a fraction of a second longer than necessary, and a warmth spread through her arm, tingling to her fingertips. Another time, as they painted the kitchen cabinets, their heads bumped playfully, and their laughter echoed through the cabin, light and unrestrained. Elara found herself noticing small details about him. The way his dark hair fell across his forehead when he concentrated, the gentle crinkles around his eyes when he smiled, the quiet hum he sometimes made as he worked. She noticed how easily he moved, how attuned he was to his surroundings, how he seemed to draw strength from the earth beneath his feet. As the cabin slowly transformed, so too did Elara. She found a deep satisfaction in the tangible progress, in seeing her grandmother's beloved home slowly come back to life. She chose colors that spoke of the valley, soft greens, warm ochres, sky blues. She unearthed old furniture, lovingly sanding and refinishing pieces, imagining her grandmother's hands doing the same. The cabin was no longer just a place. It was becoming her place, a sanctuary infused with memory and burgeoning hope. One evening, after a particularly productive day of installing new window panes, they sat on the porch again, watching the sunset paint the clouds in fiery hues. Elara felt a profound sense of peace. "I never thought I'd be able to do any of this," she confessed, flexing her sore but strong fingers. "I was so disconnected from everything hands-on. I always just thought with my head." Finn turned to her, his gaze soft. "You're learning to listen to your hands and your heart, too. This place has a way of waking up parts of you that have been dormant." She looked at him then, truly looked at him, seeing not just the kind man who helped her fix her cabin, but someone who saw horror deeply and truly. Her guard, which she hadn't even realized was still up, slowly began to lower. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked, a genuine curiosity in her voice. "The city, the fast pace, the ambition?" He considered her question for a moment, then shook his head slowly. "Not really. I found my ambition here. To live simply, to connect, to understand the world in a different way. To appreciate the small, constant wonders." He gestured to the fading light, the first stars beginning to prick through the twilight. "Like those?" Elara felt a lump form in her throat. His words resonated with a yearning she hadn't quite articulated for herself, but now recognized. She realized that she wasn't just restoring a cabin, she was restoring herself. And Finn, with his quiet strength and gentle wisdom, was an unexpected vital part of that restoration. The weeks flowed onward, marked by the changing colors of autumn. The leaves on the maples and oaks surrounding the cabin turned brilliant shades of crimson and gold, and the air grew sharper, carrying the scent of wood smoke and crisp, decaying leaves. Elara and Finn had established a comfortable, almost domestic routine. He would arrive most mornings, often with a fresh-baked loaf of bread from the general store, or a bag of apples, and they would work on the cabin until late afternoon. Sometimes they'd venture further afield, exploring the winding trails of the valley, Finn pointing out different trees, animal tracks, or forgotten pioneer homesteads. One day, while exploring a particularly secluded part of the woods, they stumbled upon a small moss-covered clearing, bathed in dappled sunlight. In the center stood a majestic old oak, its branches spreading wide like welcoming arms. A small handcrafted wooden bench was nestled beneath it, worn smooth by time. "This was Grandma June's secret spot," Elara whispered, a wave of nostalgia washing over her. "She used to bring me here when I was little. We'd tell stories or just sit in silence. She called it her thinking place." Finn sat on the bench, patting the spot beside him. Elara joined him, leaning back against the rough bark of the oak. The silence here was different, deeper, imbued with memory and a sense of timeless peace. "She was a wise woman, your grandmother," Finn said, his voice soft. "I heard stories about her when I first moved here. Everyone respected her." Elara smiled, a bittersweet warmth spreading through her. She always knew what to say, or more importantly, what not to say. She had a way of just being, making you feel seen. She paused, then took a deep breath. "I think I ran away from that. From her legacy. From the idea that I had to be like her, grounded and content here. I thought I needed to prove myself in the big city, make a name, achieve something grand." She looked at Finn, her eyes vulnerable. "But all I achieved was exhaustion." Finn reached out, his hand gently covering hers where it rested on the bench. His touch was warm and reassuring, sending a shiver through her. "There's no shame in changing your path, Elara. Sometimes the grandest achievement is finding your way back to yourself, wherever that may be." His words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within her. She squeezed his hand lightly in acknowledgement, a silent thank you. In that moment, surrounded by the ancient wisdom of the forest and the quiet understanding of Finn, Elara felt a profound shift. The last vestiges of her urban anxieties, her self-doubt, seemed to melt away, replaced by a clarity and a burgeoning sense of hope. Later that week, a small crisis arose. A sudden, unexpected cold snap brought an early frost, and the old plumbing in the cabin, despite Finn's best efforts at insulating, sprang a leak in the crawlspace. It was a messy, frustrating job, requiring them to work in cramped, cold conditions. Elara, initially daunted, surprised herself by tackling it with a pragmatic determination. She crawled into the tight space, holding the flashlight, handing Finn tools, her face smudged with dirt and grease, her hair escaping its ponytail. As they finally emerged, triumphant and covered in grime, Finn looked at her, a genuine laugh bubbling up from his chest. "Look at you," he said, wiping a streak of dirt from her cheek with his thumb. True Celestine Valley woman. Who would have thought?" Elara swatted playfully at his arm, but her heart swelled at his words. She looked down at her dirty hands, then at her reflection in the dim window pane, seeing a woman she barely recognized. Tougher, more resilient, yet also more joyful. "Definitely not me," she admitted, a wide grin spreading across her face. "But I think I like her." That evening, after hot showers and a comforting meal of Finn's homemade chili, they sat by the crackling fire, a comfortable silence settling between them. The cabin, now almost fully restored, felt truly like a home. The new paint gleamed, the repaired floorboards no longer creaked, and the warmth from the wood stove filled every corner. Elara had even started to arrange her grandmother's old books on a newly built shelf, their worn spines a comforting sight. Finn, leaning back in an armchair, watched her as she meticulously placed a faded copy of a poetry anthology. "It looks good, Elara," he said softly. "You've brought it back to life." She turned, meeting his gaze. "We have," she corrected, her voice gentle. "I couldn't have done it without you, Finn." Their eyes locked, and the air thickened with unspoken emotion. The casual touches, the shared laughter, the quiet understanding. It all culminated in this moment. Elara felt a blush creep up her neck, a nervous flutter in her stomach. She hadn't been looking for this, hadn't expected it. But here it was, undeniable and potent. This connection, this burgeoning affection for the man sitting across from her, was as real and tangible as the sturdy beams of the cabin itself. Finn slowly rose from his chair and walked towards her. He stopped just a foot away, close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him, to catch the subtle scent of wood smoke and pine that always clung to him. His gaze dropped to her lips, then met her eyes again, a question unspoken but clear. Elara's breath hitched. She didn't move, couldn't move, held captive by the intensity of his presence. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drum beat in the quiet cabin. Every fiber of her being urged her forward, to close the small distance between them. But Finn, ever the gentle soul, simply lifted his hand, his thumb tracing a light path along her jawline, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down her spine. "You belong here, Elara," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "More than you know." He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But the unspoken promise in his eyes, the lingering warmth of his touch, was a powerful declaration. He was giving her space, allowing her to come to her own conclusions, to fully embrace this new path she was on. Elara felt a profound gratitude for his patience, his understanding. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that this was just the beginning. The cabin was almost finished, but their story, like the boundless stars above, was still unfolding, vast and full of luminous possibility. Elara spent the next few days in a soft haze of anticipation and purpose. The cabin, indeed, was almost finished. The smell of fresh pine and sawdust still clung to the air, but now it mingled with the fainter scent of beeswax polish and newly laid linen. Liam, true to his word, gave her space, but his presence was a constant comforting hum in the background of her days. He continued working on the last details, fitting the kitchen drawers, installing the antique brass fixtures in the bathroom, building a small sturdy porch swing that would overlook the valley. She found herself drawn to the cabin each morning, not just as a project, but as a future. She would bring him coffee, hot and steaming, and they would share a quiet breakfast on the makeshift countertop, the rising sun painting the interior in gold. She helped where she could, sanding a rough edge, oiling a window frame, her hands growing accustomed to the work, to the feel of honest craftsmanship. With each small task, she felt herself settling deeper into this new rhythm, this new identity. The city, with its frantic pace and demanding deadlines, felt like a distant, half-forgotten dream. One evening, as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in shades of deep violet and indigo, Liam stepped back from the porch swing, wiping his hands on his jeans. "There," he said, his voice soft with satisfaction. "It's done. Truly done." Elara walked over, her heart thrumming. The swing hung perfectly, an invitation to quiet evenings and whispered conversations. She reached out, her fingers tracing the smooth, cool wood. "It's beautiful, Liam," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "All of it. It's more than I ever imagined." He turned to her, his gaze gentle and searching. "It's yours, Elara." But she shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "No," she corrected, stepping closer, reaching out to touch his arm. "It's yours, isn't it?" A slow, radiant smile spread across his face, lighting up his eyes like the first stars appearing in the twilight sky. He didn't say anything, but the warmth of his hand covering hers, the slight squeeze, was all the answer she needed. That night, they didn't sleep in their separate tents. Liam led her inside the cabin, the air cool and fresh. He had built a simple, sturdy bed frame in the main room and adorned it with a thick mattress and crisp white sheets. The fireplace, expertly built, cast a warm, dancing glow across the room. There was no electricity yet, but the soft light of a few lanterns and the crackling fire filled the space with an intimate, magical ambience. They lay side by side, not speaking, just listening to the quiet symphony of the forest outside, the chirping crickets, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl. Her head rested on his shoulder, his arm around her, pulling her close. The scent of him, pine, earth, and something uniquely Liam, filled her senses, grounding her, comforting her. It felt like coming home, a home she hadn't even known she was searching for. The next morning, they packed up their tents, the last vestiges of their temporary existence. The cabin was truly ready for living. Liam had installed a solar panel system for basic electricity, and a well for water. It was rustic, yes, but also utterly perfect. Elara knew she had a decision to make. Her old life, her design job in the city, the apartment she still technically rented, it all waited for her. But the thought of returning to it felt increasingly alien, like trying to squeeze back into a shoe that no longer fit. Here, in the quiet expanse of the mountains, with Liam by her side, she felt a profound sense of rightness, of belonging. One afternoon, a week after the cabin was finished, she finally broached the subject. They were sitting on the newly installed porch swing, sipping tea, watching a pair of hawks circle majestically above the valley. "I need to go back to the city," she said, her voice softer than she intended, a pang of reluctance already gripping her heart. Liam turned his head, his expression unreadable. "For good?" She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the quiet strength in his profile, the gentle curve of his lips, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice a whisper. "I need to tie up loose ends, pack my things, tell my boss." She paused, then added, "Tell my old life goodbye." He nodded slowly. "I understand. Take your time, Elara. Do what you need to do." His understanding was a balm, alleviating the pressure she felt. He wasn't pushing her, wasn't demanding anything. He was simply there, a steady anchor. "Will you be here when I get back?" she asked, a sudden fear gripping her. He reached out, his hand finding hers, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Always," he said, his voice low and firm. "This is home, Elara, and I'll be here." The drive back to the city was surreal. The familiar landmarks, the incessant honking, the towering buildings that once felt like a comforting embrace, now seemed suffocating, overwhelming. Her apartment felt small, dusty, filled with ghosts of a life that no longer resonated with her. The meticulously curated furniture, the stacks of design magazines, they all felt like props from a play she was no longer starring in. Her boss, a formidable woman named Evelyn, was initially surprised, then somewhat understanding, when Elara explained her decision to leave. "You've been different since you came back from that retreat, Elara," Evelyn had said, her sharp eyes softening. "Happier, more grounded. I'll miss your talent, but I won't stand in the way of your happiness." Saying goodbye to her friends was harder. They were surprised, some even skeptical. "You're moving to the middle of nowhere? For a YJ cabin? And a man you just met?" One friend, Sarah, had asked, her voice laced with concern. Elara smiled, a genuine unburdened smile. "It's more than a cabin, Sarah. It's a feeling. It's right." She found herself explaining the quiet mornings, the starry nights, the satisfaction of working with her hands, the profound connection she felt with Liam. She realized, as she spoke, how much she had changed, how much she had grown. She wasn't running away. She was running towards something. The packing was therapeutic. She sorted through her belongings, keeping only what truly mattered, what held sentimental value, or what would be useful in her new life. Books, a few cherished photos, her grandmother's quilt, her sketching pencils and pads. The rest she donated or sold. She was shedding layers, preparing for a simpler, richer existence. After 2 weeks, the city felt like an old coat she was finally ready to discard. She called Liam from her nearly empty apartment, her voice filled with a lightness she hadn't known she possessed. "I'm coming home," she told him, the words tasting sweet on her tongue. He was waiting for her when she drove up the winding dirt road, his truck parked by the cabin. He stood on the porch, a silhouette against the setting sun, and her heart swelled with a joy so potent it brought tears to her eyes. She parked her car, got out, and ran into his open arms. His embrace was strong, familiar, and utterly comforting. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around once before setting her down, his lips finding hers in a kiss that tasted of longing, relief, and a promise of forever. "Welcome home, Elara," he whispered against her hair, holding her close. Life in the cabin settled into a rhythm that was both peaceful and fulfilling. Elara, with her design background, found a new outlet for her creativity. She started sketching ideas for small furniture pieces, for decor that blended seamlessly with the rustic charm of the cabin. She found a local artisan who taught her basic woodworking, and soon, her hands were calloused but happy, crafting shelves, a small coffee table, and intricate wooden frames for the photos she had brought from her old life, now mixed with new ones of her and Liam, laughing in the forest, building their life together. Liam, ever the patient teacher, showed her how to tend a small vegetable garden they started near the cabin. She learned about soil, about seeds, about the delicate balance of nature. There was a profound satisfaction in harvesting their first tomatoes, their crisp lettuce, knowing they had grown it with their own hands. They spent their evenings by the fire, reading, talking, or simply existing in comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackling wood and the gentle hum of the forest. They spoke of their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Liam, usually so reserved, opened up to her about his childhood, growing up in a small mountain town, his love for craftsmanship instilled by his grandfather, his quiet contentment with a life lived close to the earth. He admitted he'd been lonely before she arrived, though he hadn't fully realized it until her presence filled the void. "I never thought I'd find someone who understood this," he confessed one night, gazing into the flames, his hand resting lightly on her knee. "Someone who would want this life as much as I do." Elara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I never knew I wanted it," she admitted softly. "But now that I'm here with you, I can't imagine living any other way." Their love deepened with each shared sunrise, each whispered secret under the vast canopy of stars. It wasn't a whirlwind romance of grand gestures, but a steady, profound connection built on shared values, mutual respect, and a quiet, enduring passion. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves turned vibrant shades of crimson and gold, Liam suggested a hike to a secluded waterfall he knew. Elara, bundled in a warm sweater, eagerly agreed. They walked hand in hand, the air smelling of damp earth and pine, the crunch of leaves underfoot a soothing melody. When they reached the waterfall, a delicate cascade of silver against moss-covered rocks, Liam led her to a smooth, flat stone overlooking the pool below. He sat her down, then knelt before her, not with a ring in hand, but with something far more precious. He pulled a small, intricately carved wooden box from his pocket. It was made of a dark, rich wood, polished to a soft sheen, with delicate swirling patterns etched into its surface. "I made this for you," he said, his voice a little husky. "From a piece of the old oak tree that stood by the cabin. It's seen a lot of seasons, that tree, a lot of life." He opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft moss, was a simple silver ring, handcrafted, with a single, small, raw sapphire set into it, mirroring the deep blue of Elara's eyes. "Elara," he began, his gaze steady and full of unwavering love. "When you first came here, I thought you were just a client, a temporary guest. But then you started to see this place. Truly see it. And then you started to see Ime. You brought a light into my life I didn't even know was missing. You make this cabin a home, not just a structure." He took the ring from the box, his hand trembling slightly. "I don't need grand gestures, Elara. I need quiet mornings and shared sunsets. I need your laughter echoing through these woods. I need your hand in mine, walking this path, whatever it brings. Will you build a life with me, here, in this place we've made our own? Will you marry me? Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Elara's face, warm and joyful. She didn't hesitate. "Yes," she choked out, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh yes, Liam, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, a symbol of their unique love, forged in the heart of the mountains. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply, the sound of the waterfall a natural symphony to their union. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, held on the porch of their cabin the following spring. Only a few close friends and Liam's small family were present. Elara wore a simple, flowing dress she had designed herself, adorned with wildflowers she had gathered from the meadow. Liam wore a linen shirt and trousers, looking handsome and radiating happiness. The ceremony was brief, heartfelt, and imbued with the natural beauty surrounding them. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other through all seasons, through all challenges, under the boundless sky. As they exchanged rings, a matching silver band for Liam, simple and strong, a gentle breeze rustled through the trees, as if the forest itself was offering its blessing. The years that followed were filled with quiet joys and shared adventures. The cabin became their sanctuary, a testament to their love. They expanded their garden, added a small, sun-drenched studio for Elara's woodworking and design work, and even built a small guest cottage for friends and family who came to visit, curious about their idyllic life. Elara continued to design, but now her focus was on creating beautiful, sustainable pieces inspired by nature, selling them to a growing online community and local galleries. Liam continued his carpentry, his hands always busy, always creating, but now with a partner to share his vision. They taught local workshops, sharing their skills and their passion for craftsmanship and connection to the earth. They walked the forest trails often, hand in hand, their conversations flowing easily, punctuated by comfortable silences. They watched the seasons change, the snow blanketing the peaks, the wildflowers bursting into bloom, the leaves turning fiery hues. Each year brought new growth, new understanding, deeper love. One evening, many years later, they sat on their porch swing, the same one Liam had built all those years ago. The sun had just set, painting the sky in soft pastels, and the first stars were beginning to twinkle. Their hands were intertwined, comfortably worn from years of work and love. Elara leaned her head on Liam's shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. Her hair, now streaked with silver, brushed his cheek. "Remember when I first arrived here?" she murmured, a gentle smile playing on her lips. "So lost, so unsure." Liam chuckled softly, his arm tightening around her. "I remember a woman who was afraid to get her hands dirty, but whose eyes held a spark I couldn't ignore. And you," she continued, "the quiet carpenter who built a cabin, and unknowingly built a future for us both." He kissed the top of her head. "It was always meant to be, Elara. This place, this life." They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars emerge, brighter and more numerous with each passing minute. The cabin, weathered and loved, stood behind them, a beacon of warmth and belonging. Their story, once unfolding like the boundless stars, had found its beautiful, luminous path. It was a story of finding home, not just in a place, but in the heart of another, a timeless tale whispered by the wind through the pines and celebrated by the endless, glittering night sky. Their love, like the mountains surrounding them, was steadfast, enduring, and forever unfolding in the quiet, profound beauty of their shared life.